Hello and welcome to the Bridge of Love. My name is Erin Cameron. Today I wanted to focus on something I think we all have in common, our loved ones on the other side, uh, our loved ones who've passed over, and that connection that has been such a big part of my journey. I thought a lot about it, and I've been holding on to this episode for a while because it is such a personal story. And I really finally came to the conclusion that that's why it's so important to share. And I find all of this creative process to be um, so much. I get so much out of it, and I just finally landed on I want to do it. I just want to do it. So I'm going to share my story today of my sister Emily, and I have shared this in a few interviews and also in the very first episode of The Bridge of Love. So if you want to go back and uh, get that version, you're welcome to. The reason I thought of this, of having this episode today, the reason it originally came to me is because I just over and over have had so many people that when I tell them what I do, um, or in meeting them, they tell me of their loved one who's passed over, and that is their example of connecting in higher consciousness. And they sort of think of their story as I tell mine, even if I just tell them about Hadden and how we communicate. And I think that is such a beautiful example of all of this being there's a part of us that already knows all of this and knows the truth that in higher levels of consciousness, as we allow ourselves to exist there and allow that connection, we are all the same. The truth of what we are, who we are, energetically, our being is the same in those higher levels of consciousness, whether we are here in physical form or on the other side, or in the magical form of someone like Hadden, who doesn't speak, but somehow she gets across everything she wants to. So that was kind of my initial, light bulb of this being an important thing to dig into and share because it's such a common experience, a common thing in the human experience. It is, and I believe in that. When the ideas for SoulSpeak were coming in, when those downloads were coming through like a year ago, a really big part of it was that part of my experience with Emily and what her role was in that ascension process for me, in ascending into those higher levels of consciousness, out of loneliness into love, basically, in the most basic sense. And my point is, it's such an important piece of Soul Speak for me, as well. And it's all so connected. Hadden is just in my life to bring all of this all the way to the forefront in our everyday lives. And but my experience with Emily is so important, and it's part of how I evolved into all of this with Hadden, and Hadden led me back to Emily, and I want to talk about that. So basically today I want to talk about the roles of these people that we loved and shared experiences in the physical with, and that we still love, and that we can still share experiences with in the physical. So I want to go through the meaning behind that, what that means to me, and just how we can really live with them here, and bring them in and allow them. They're already here, and I know you know this because um, I again I think that it was such the beautiful realization that I had is that anyone who was coming to me, like, they already knew. the truth behind the things that I was learning from Hadden. And they were already realizing and recognizing the presence of that connection in their life through the people that they were usually most close to in this life that passed over. And I really, in my heart, know that that actually has a role. And it doesn't mean they didn't have a role here in the physical and that you don't have different roles here in the physical. But in terms of ascending us, I think it's just such a wonderful opportunity to allow that connection into your everyday life. And it continues to expand. And so I'll go into the ways that has expanded in my life. So my sister, Emily, we are twins, and my mom didn't know she was having twins. And we just, she went in to have us, and the birth process was a little traumatic, and I came out first. I'm highly competitive, obviously, and Emily came out after me. And in that process, it was pretty stressful on her body. I think we were kind of bumping into each other as we attempted our exit, but she was also much smaller than me. We were 2 months premature, and I was 4 pounds 2 ounces, and she was 2 pounds and 6 ounces. And my dad used to say, that we fit in the palm of his hand, each of us. And that was just a visual that stuck with me. And so we came out pretty early, and we stayed in the hospital for a little while. And when they sent us home, they didn't have like pulse oximeters and monitors back then, like I had for Hadden. So she passed away from sudden infant death, essentially. And we were 2 months old when that happened. So that's how long I had with her. The time in the womb, 7 months, and then 2 months, essentially 9 months. And I wanted to read to you a poem that someone wrote from my parents, from our church. It says it's written May 19th, 1977, for David and Anita by Mrs. Ray Merrill, and in parentheses, Mary. So I think Ray is her husband. So that's cute. From New Sharon, Iowa. And she titled it Our Rosebuds. 2 little rosebuds blossomed a while, velvety soft as a baby's smile, sent from the heavenly garden above for David and Anita to nurture and love. And when these rosebuds came to bloom within their garden fair, they knew our loving Lord had heard those years of earnest prayer. But one sweet flower seemed so frail, Emily, fair and small. Every time I get to that part. How lovingly they cared for her, this tiny living doll. And then the master clipped the stem and took her back to him, leaving just one precious bud, Erin, her sister twin. Now one little flower is left to grow, and daily, hour by hour, the tender petals will unfold and become a lovely flower. The beauty and the fragrance of that other tiny rose will be enjoyed in heaven, our loving Father knows. We cannot doubt or question the heavenly gardener's plan. We cannot soothe the aching heart, but we know Jesus can. I made it through. So I've always known that existed, and I thought it was so touching that someone from our church would that didn't even, my parents, the way they told the story was she just didn't, she didn't even know us, and she heard the story and wrote this poem. And I thought that alone was such a beautiful part of the story. Because, to have something like that, a poem that, so beautifully tells that story and holds it in all of that faith is so, so great. So I always knew that story and grew up knowing about that poem and knowing about Emily, of course. I have like 3 pictures of us. One, we're laying on a blanket together, and I have like a couple of those, and then one with my mom holding both of us. And the ones that we were laying down, one of them actually were like touching hands, and that is just my favorite because I can literally see our connection. I can see like how in our presence, in our both of us, I can see how we could feel each other. And one thing she's always said to me is that, that physical connection we had, what we were actually feeling was the energetic connection. So that is how she described, that she's still here in that form that I've always known. So the first time I experienced that, I was in a yoga class, and I was about to get married in the next like couple weeks or a month. And I took this super intense yoga class, and just totally real deal, this tiny studio in Tucson, Arizona. And at the end, I'm laying in Shavasana, the pose where you're literally laying down and eyes closed, flat on the floor. And as I'm laying there, I was so relaxed from the class. I felt my body sink into the floor, and I came out of my body. And so I could see my body. I was sort of hanging above myself. And I had this feeling instantly of every problem, stress, worry, human concern. It was in my body. I left it, and I was out experiencing absolute pure consciousness and bliss, freedom from all of that. And it was a feeling I'll never forget. and in and so Emily was there fairly quickly. She was the first, other than my experience of my body and how I sort of left my body and all my problems in my body, and then feeling this freedom and the feeling of that, I instantly felt Emily there, and I knew she was there. It was like she just was. I knew it. And I got from her that she basically said, I'm here with you. I'm always with you, and I'll be at every important event in your life. And I knew at that moment what she meant was she'll be at my wedding. And I think she even said, I'll be at your wedding and every important event in your life. And I was like, cool, Emily's here. And she's saying all this stuff to me. And then I went back in my body. All of a sudden it was like I just dropped right back in, and I I even remember that feeling of sort of taking up my body again. Um, which was also really beautiful, to almost feel that, transition into like the density. Anyway, I can go into that, back to that so much. And it was a really special experience. And but I just sort of went on about my life. And, uh, my experience with her before that was, throughout my childhood. And I'll talk about this a little bit more because I wanted to read a channeled message from her first, but um, was the experience of just thinking about what she'd be like, in as my sister. I remember being like pretty young teenager, kind of thinking like, what would that have been like? And, I thought about her constantly. And then after that experience and through my adult years, I felt more of a loneliness and a gap in my life, from her not being there. And I'll speak about that a little more too. But that was that is the story of us. And what I imagine for today is that we all take this experience and the message that I'm going to read to you that I received from her is and sort of feel into that for yourself and receive it for yourself and for your loved ones. So once I learned to channel Hadden and learn to get those messages from her, Emily was one of most the other first person that I was like, I gotta connect to Emily in this way and see what she has to say. So one of those early messages I have, I read on the very first episode of The Bridge of Love. So you're welcome to go back and listen to that. But this one I got very recently in May of this year. And it has been, I feel like since I got this one, it was like probably just the most high vibrational. I was probably just in, my channel was opening more and I was in a higher vibration than even in the earlier messages. And something in it just clicked for me about how they exist with us. And it's been so powerful that I don't really need to sit and get messages from her. Um, I still do. I did actually the other night just for fun because I had an experience with her and Hadden, in non-physical, which I'll share at the very end of this episode. And I wanted clarity on that. And so, but other than that, I really haven't, taken, I don't think, any messages from her since this one because it was so powerful and it felt so true. And it just, these, these messages teach you, they don't even teach you, you just remember, right? On a deeper level. And once you remember, you're like, okay, I'm good. I remember. We're connected. She's here and this is how. And it kind of sinks in. So hopefully it'll do that for you. Okay. So she says, she always starts, Dear sister, you have always been this incredible power of light. You have always been light. And this light has within it a knowing of all that is being conveyed, a knowing of all. Your light, you are all knowing. Feel my energy with you now, my light. It is within yours, is yours. My light is your light. We are that close. Don't try to understand. Feel my presence. I am so pure. I am pure energy and light, as you are pure energy and light and love. And it is within your realization of these that we are together. When you feel into your own pureness, own clarity, your own light, your own knowing, your own truth, I am there. I am always here, and you can have experiences with me, communicate with me, connect with me here in this vibration, in the love that we share. I love you. I always have. Your human has been programmed to miss me because she was told I wasn't here. She was told that I died. And you can hold that you in your love and light now, because I am still with her too. I never left. I am here. Feel me in the stillness of you, in the purest part of you, in that most ascended vibration that you came into. It's a tuning in to that part of you, that vibrational part of you, which is within you, within every cell. Continue to feel me with you and know that there is nothing to miss. What you felt in our human presence was my vibration. In our human bond, it was energetic. I've told you this before. It is the human programming through everyone else telling you that I was gone. Instead of reminding you of the part of you that still knew me, that was still connected to me, and always has been, and always will be. You were taught that I died. And that belief was stronger than your inner knowing, because your desire for the stability of a family and your life path was such that that was an important thing to go with, along with at the time. But my love is unconditional, and I have always been with you and always will be with you. We are forever linked. Know that I am here. You can feel the same connection that you know is me. You know is me. Feel into the knowing part of me, of you. You know I am here always. Feel. Know. Remember. Everything is energy. We always had an energetic bond, and we still have an energetic bond and recognition and knowing of one another. You may not know me as a personality because that didn't come out yet. You know me as a presence, as a part of you that you have never been without. And you can open to my guidance. I love you and I am with you now and always. Keep your innocence. Within that innocence is great wisdom that you are remembering. So what I find so interesting is that I do miss her, that I did have the experience of missing her. And just in that is something so precious. It's a reminder of how connected we are to each other. And as humans and souls, because at the age I lost her, I was probably more connected to my soul and her soul than my body and her body, right? I think that's why we don't generally have memories from before we're like 3 years old, because everything is experienced through our soul, and the brain isn't developed enough to form memory of those experiences. So I didn't have much time with her in the physical, right? Just a few months. So why would that have such an impact on me for my entire life? And why would I miss her so much? I think it's because of that soul level connection. Something in me knew her, even though on a human level, I didn't have time to get to know her. A part of me always felt connected to her, which is why I thought about her so much, right? To me, it was like going through life, knowing someone is a part of your life that isn't there, which in itself is quite a spiritual experience. And I was having this all along, even as a young child. And another important part of my SoulSpeak method that came to me was that there are no accidents in the people that are in our lives. And that includes those that pass over. And for me, Emily's role was so important. Like I said, I believe that's the case for everyone on the other side if we're willing to open to their presence. We are all here together and we're all ascending together collectively. And so, what was her role? She connected me to the spiritual realm from a very young age. Knowing her as a part of my life drew me into the non physical very early. To think about someone who isn't around as much as I thought about her, I was contemplating spiritual concepts before I even realized it. And this wasn't just me thinking about her. The thinking about her and wondering what she'd be like, it came from our connection. I know that now. That's why she came into my consciousness, right? We are consciousness, and our thoughts come from that. Those thoughts came from love. It came from our time in the womb and our short time together after we were born. And it is this love and this connection which made her the first and only presence that I sensed when I came out of my body. So she's obviously like my primary connection over there. I have others for sure, but yeah, she was right there. So the other value of having these messages from Emily is that they gave me perspective on my whole entire journey. And I've said this before, but when you start having a spiritual experience with your child, you're on a journey. And it just, Emily's messages made the whole thing makes more sense because we all have a very specifically chosen journey. And this is mine. And so in one earlier message I got from her, she said she could support me and my life better from the other side. And when I got that, I was like, oh, like they're so close to us, that they can guide us in ways that we can't even imagine. We're always being guided, protected. I mean, she says this: loved, guided, protected, supported. That's what they're doing. All of them. So that was her role in my life. And what came through when I wrote SoulSpeak is that these connections are just as important as those we have in the physical, that their presence in our lives and then on the other side has a purpose. And that purpose is ascension. And that ascension is a collective ascension. We're all ascending together. Consciousness is ascending as a whole, and we're all part of the same consciousness. So it's their role through love to help us to ascend. And through our love for them and their love for us, through our soul level connection, which is ultimately love. And love ascends, right? And by ascension in this case, it expands as you allow it. But, initially it was just me coming again out of that lonely feeling and getting enough messages from her that I eventually just kind of knew she was there. So for me, in my journey, Emily and Hadden have been this sort of beautiful circle. My initial awakening starting when I connected with Emily, and this opening me spiritually to eventually connecting with Hadden, which then led me back to reconnecting with Emily. Because from the time I came out of my body and connected with Emily to just a few years ago, I still had a huge gap in my life, as I told you, a place in my heart that felt empty because she wasn't here, a loneliness that I couldn't reconcile. And that had been there for a really long time. And I didn't actually know that was from I kind of had this feeling that it was, but I really hadn't recognized it and seen it and dealt with it until, recent years. And it was a key part of my journey to understand where that loneliness came from and to find my way through it. Because loneliness is essentially the opposite of the oneness that we feel in higher vibrational states and in higher states of consciousness. So it was holding me down in a sense. But this was all perfect and part of my journey through different levels of consciousness. We all come here to experience these different levels and move on to the next one as we're ready, which is always the perfect time, I promise you. So part of the importance of connecting and communicating, on the soul level, whether it's with someone that's here with you or on the other side, is to find ways to experience that connection. And with people on the other side, I think the easiest and most fun and most common is seeing them in your physical world. When I sort of learned this, I learned to ask, what is Emily to me? How is she showing up in my life? What are you here? How can I see you? How will you show up in my world? And I was on a walk one day right up my street here, and it's just like this hill, and I'm almost to the top. And I was like, I felt my connection with her pretty clearly, and I just asked, okay, what are you? And I mean, instantly, almost before I finished answering the question, I look and there's a giant red rose in my face, like sticking out of someone's garden through the railing. And I'm like, okay, that's pretty obvious. Like, it was right in my face. Like, I'm red roses. I was like, okay, you're red roses. That is not something I would have ever chosen. Nothing I'm like super obsessed with or anything like that, right? So, okay, Emily is red roses. And then I got home later that day and I remembered this poem. And I was like, just really deep in my brain, somewhere in a file, was like, wasn't that? And I called my mom and I said, wasn't that? Were we flowers? What were we in that poem? And she said we were roses. And she just knew. And I was like, oh my God, I told her the story of, how the red rose was like, yep, that's her. And we were both just like, oh my God. So, and this has also been pretty fun sharing all this with my mom, because when she shows up for me, she's showing up for her too, right? So I just thought, wow, that's incredible. So sometimes I see two red roses. Very commonly, it's two. And sometimes it's a whole lot. Like, I was biking one day and I had never noticed before, but there was this fence line, like a white picket fence someone had created right along the road. And I mean, red roses for a quarter mile. It had to be just beautiful. So the white fence with the red roses in front of it. And it was just, I'm biking along this fence line, like, I could hardly breathe. And I could just feel her. I could just feel this, like, and I was like, hi. I mean, I'm like biking and I'm like, okay, so she's biking with me. Like, I could feel her. That was a really big moment for me, because I could feel that she was actually experiencing what I was experiencing here with me. That was my experience of it. And that, I just love that, because I haven't had experiences with her that I can remember. So to have those, to continue to have them, to have her pop in at times when I'm in complete and total joy, is usually when they're going to appear to you. And that is kind of a big factor, is your vibration. If we are all energy, they can only come down so far vibrationally, right, to meet us. So that's what can be difficult, if you're in the grief still, which I had a whole lifetime to, move through that. And I didn't experience it in the same way, because I was so young when she passed over. So, but that is I just know that it's dependent on your vibration. So the times when they come in is either, I'm in channel and I've intentionally gotten myself to a really relaxed vibration. And that was a practice, or it's times when I'm in, when I'm biking and I'm at the end of my ride and I'm in full joy, right? And she's like, I'm here. So, how does this work? Consciousness actually focuses itself, has the ability to focus itself into physical form. It's how we exist here. So very commonly, things that are higher frequency are easier for them, I think. Birds are really common um, because the birds are in a higher frequency. And so they use their consciousness to sort of become that thing. And so when you look at it, their essence is in it. They have sort of concentrated themselves down into that form and put their consciousness in that form for you. And they are hanging out here in that form. And that's why when you look at it, whatever it is, a flower, a bird, that's why you get the feeling of them. That's why you get reminded of them, because they literally are there. Their consciousness is there. Their consciousness is always here. These are just the fun ways that they really make our brain go, oh, yeah, I know. So a way to do this is you can actually ask them at any time and just be open. What are you to me? And be open, and it'll either appear to you, or maybe you just get the thought, or maybe it's not till later that day or later that week, or just let it come. um, or you can actually um, ask them to come in as a certain thing. So I've heard people do this where they'll ask their loved one to, okay, well, if you're here, then I need to see a penny face up on the ground or whatever. That's what I'm picking for you. And oftentimes I think we actually choose the thing they would have chosen, because that's how consciousness works. We're getting it from them and from that connection. So you can try either of those things. And I promise you, it's going to happen. It's going to be magical, and it's just going to keep happening. And what happened with the roses thing actually expanded further. But really quick, I actually wanted to mention a story about my grandparents. I would, because of the bird, remembering that birds are such a common way that they focus, thing that they focus into. I was on a run again. Actually, I was probably just, yeah, I was running, and I actually run down my hill when I run because up is impossible. And at the beginning of my run, I see two hummingbirds, like in this yard that's like 2 yards down from my house. And they're like playing in front of this tree. And I'm like, oh, that's so cute. They were like circling each other and just doing this whole like playful dance. And hummingbirds are just fun to watch anyway. You hardly ever see them. And very high frequency. So I was like, oh yeah, I'm in a high vibe. I see hummingbirds. So I go on my run and I come back up the hill later, and the same two hummingbirds are across the street and like 2 more yards up, something like that. Like they kind of had made their way up the hill. They clearly wanted me to see them again. And I'm like, okay, who are you? Like, all right, I see you. Because they were like, hey, and they were doing the whole dance again, playing. And just instantly I got, oh my God, it's my grandparents, my dad's parents, my grandma and grandpa. And it was just so fun. They don't always come in that way, but they did that day. And it was awesome. They usually come in separately for me, and I have a very different experience of each of them. But that day it was like they were like, we're here. And I know they're on the other side doing that because they were together forever in the physical. So I knew as soon as my grandmother passed away, she went second. And I knew she was hanging out with him instantly. And another way that they come in for me are dreams. I had a fairly occurring dream of my grandpa. He would come into my dreams and like he'd be in my life like he's actually there. And after a while, I was like, why do you keep doing this? Because I would get really confused in the dream. It was like very real. Like he was just at dinner with us or doing all the normal things he used to do. And I'm like, yeah, but you're not. This was almost 20 years ago. I, and I was like, probably like 10 years after he passed away, 5, 10 years. Yeah, something like that. And he just came in my dream like over and over and over for a long period of time, maybe like a number of months, until I started getting a little creeped out by it. I didn't know, at the time, I wasn't super open to this stuff. And it was kind of, I think when we're in certain lower frequencies than they are, it actually comes in as kind of like scary. Oh, and we get a little freaked out by it. Like, how's that possible that you're, so it was like, it was freaking me out. And I was like, okay, Grandpa. I finally realized he was just trying to tell me that he's here. Like every time we have a family thing. And in my dream, I was like, what are you doing here? You're not here. And he's like, yeah, I am. And I'm like, but you're not. And I had this experience over and over and over so many times. And again, at the time, I was not thinking it was magical. I was more like trying to figure it out. I was in my head going, okay, I'm in this dream and I can feel him here. I see him in the dream. He's here, but I know that he passed away and he got really sick right before. How is he here? And in the dream, it was this very real experiences of him being in the physical. And it literally, even in waking hours, confused. Like I would wake up and be confused. I'm like, how is that? Like, anyway, so that was my experience with him. And eventually I was like, okay, I get it. I get it. You're here. And you can move on. Like, please. It's freaking me out. And I never had another dream with him again. So, you can talk to them and they will go because they will respect your wishes, or they will come in when you're in really high frequency or when you ask them, because they are here. They're just in a higher frequency than we are in the physical. So that's a few of my other experiences. And another kind of expansion of all this, it does tend to expand and continue on. And that's what I love about these relationships, that I really believe that as we rise in consciousness ourselves, we just get to continually expand into a relationship with them that is here and now, part of our reality, and really share it with them. And it doesn't, after a while, feel separate. I promise you, it feels very real. And it's a different kind of interaction, though. It is energetic and it is less physical, right? But it's also magical because it kind of takes you out of the physical, where things are just happier and lighter and freer, same as I felt when I wasn't in my body. So yeah, if it hasn't happened for you, I promise it is magical and it continues to be more and more that. So the way that the rose thing has expanded for me with Emily is recently I was on another bike ride, doing my favorite stuff, running, biking. And, getting my physical body out of the way, my mind out of the way, I think that's really powerful and gets you into those higher states, whether you're aware of it or not. And my experience on this bike ride a couple weeks ago was that I started smelling a flower that I was like, okay, I know this flower. It was such a beautiful, I kind of was riding slower because I was by myself. And the whole phrase of like, stop and smell the roses, it's like, it's real. Because I was like, this is funny. This is a ride I've been on 100 times and not had this experience where I kept smelling this one flower. And I was like, okay, I know what that is. And I would go another 100 yards or whatever and smell it again. And I'm like, oh, it was just incredible. And on the way back, sort of an out and back ride, the end of the ride, I had been still smelling it, and I don't see them. I was just smelling this flower, but I was getting different variants of it because different roses. Um, I didn't know it was a rose yet, but I was like, it hit me on the way back. I was like, oh my God, it's roses. And I didn't actually at the time think about it, but I was telling my mom about it later because I tell my mom everything. I'm on the phone with her and I'm like, wow, I just had the most heavenly experience on my bike. Like, and I start telling her about the smell of these roses, and then I realize it was roses, and she goes, "Oh my God, it was Emily. She was there the whole time." And I was like, "Oh." So sometimes even you don't click it in, like we're only human. So, and my experience was like seeing it was always red roses, right? Well, this was smelling the roses, and I just didn't connect it until she said that. And I swear to you, since then, and it's been like probably 3, 4 weeks, I keep having experiences of smelling roses and I cannot see them. Like I'll be running, it's usually running or walking past someone's yard, and people, I'm in California, so we have uh, the ability to grow these incredible flowers. And roses is one of them that does really well out here. And so many people have them. It's really amazing. I did not have that experience anywhere else I've lived. So really amazing. They're just everywhere. So all I have to do is go on a walk. But I will look for them. Even sometimes most of the time I don't see them. It's like she's just becoming the smell. I'm like, okay, all right. It's like now that she knows that I know it's her, she comes that way too. And then another expansion. It hit me the other day that at my wedding. So this is interesting because it sort of time just kind of collapses in this realization. So a very long time ago, we chose to put rose scented candles. One giant, they were like this big with multiple wicks, right? Giant candle. And they actually had roses embedded in the wax. They were gorgeous. And they were on each table in like the dining area. And it was a small basement ballroom of like an old mansion. And so it was fairly dark without them, and they lit up this little area. It was pure magic. And I still was like, wow, I still remember thinking, like, that was just a genius idea because, not very expensive. You buy these candles, throw them on each table, and the whole place just looked like incredible. And also because it wasn't very big, this is a very old mansion from like the 20s in Tulsa. And because it wasn't a very big space, the smell of those candles was everywhere. And I still remember it. And I love that candle so much and the smell so much. I had never really thought about roses or, thought I liked how they smell. I was like in my 20s. So I hadn't evolved enough to appreciate roses yet, but I kept that one candle from one table. Um, should have kept all of them, duh. I could have put them all over my house. They were huge. It was amazing. I went back, I think it was Pottery Barn. I went back to try to find them, and they just never existed ever again. That I was like, that smell, those candles with the roses and the wax. I need that candle for the rest of my life. So I kept the one. I think I still have it, but I can literally smell it if I think about it. And I had this experience the other day where I was like, oh, that was her. And of course, she already told me she was going to be there. So, yeah, all these beautiful experiences. And to allow in the different senses, right? Not just visually, but the smells can really bring you, because smells are actually even more transporting in a way into love, into higher vibrations, because they activate a different part of our brain. And that experience was just pure bliss on my bike, the candles, all of it. And I'm like, wow, I described it to my mom as heaven, and it was her, right? So that's one of the things I find so fascinating about my experience with Emily there, is that how time collapsed as I discovered, that symbolism that she chose to come through and remembered back, to another time. And even the poem, right? She tells me roses today, or, 2 years ago, but the poem was already written. This is all connected. And how magical is that? And to be able to connect to different times in my life that way and have those feelings with her around that time in my life, that in itself, is such an awesome experience of higher dimensions of consciousness where time and space don't exist. And such a fun place to go to. That is, those dimensions where our soul exists, the entirety of us, right? And to be able to connect there while we're in human form, I think is the entire point of all of this. That is realization. Realization is to make real what we really are. To bring it here, to bring heaven to earth, to live in heaven, with them on earth. It's all one. And how do you know you're there? You feel connected to those that are on the other side. That's it. And you allow them into your reality. You have experiences with them. You experience them as part of your life here and now. And I truly believe that the reason this is coming up for so many people is that consciousness is rising to a point where we can all kind of hang out there more easily. That I just think that's what's so special about this time. And yeah, if you open to it, these experiences will continue to expand. And I do have another story about, because Hadden is sunflowers to me, and I will share it for another episode, but a lot of times they come in together. I have multiple stories of that, and we're going to put them on another episode because this one has gone so long. But that is another expansion of it. And I've had multiple experiences of them coming together, like that combination of roses and sunflowers, and seeing them together and thinking, I don't know about you guys. I've never seen that combination before the last year of my life. And red roses and yellow sunflowers with the brown in the middle. That doesn't visually go. They're completely different flowers to me. I've never seen it. I don't know. But I see it now. And I run into people that are talking about it. Like, oh yeah, I got roses and sunflowers in this bouquet. And I'm like, okay, they're here. So, Hadden is multidimensional. We all are, but she's highly multidimensional and she likes to play in that way too. So they both come together. So these all happen in all of these amazing combinations, and it's all perfect for you and your journey. And however that unfolds, I hope that it brightens your day when it does. And I hope that you're able to recognize that as a meaningful presence in your life. That just because they're in non-physical doesn't mean they're not here. And it doesn't mean that they don't still have a relationship with you. And like Emily said, it's unconditional love. They wait in unconditional love for us. So it doesn't matter how long it's been, doesn't matter what you've been through, in terms of, not connecting with them for whatever reason. There's no judgment there, and they're waiting. So I hope you enjoyed this episode, and I will see you on the next one. Sending you so much love. Take care. Bye.